All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar being hosted by Keystone Medical Technologies. This is just a fantastic webinar that we've got planned for you called 3DI PACS, Redefining Image Management and Distribution. So before I jump into our webinar, my name is Dennis. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. If you could just take one moment, if you can see my screen, please take a moment and raise your hand. This way we know that we can actually you can actually see the screen, and if you can hear me as well, go ahead and get that hand up there. That's right. I've seen Carrie, Kenny, Kyle. We've got a ton of people on the webinar today, so get those hands up. Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate that. So you can hear me loud and clear, and you can see me, which is great. So if you have a question throughout today's webinar, go ahead and raise your hand and/or go ahead and put a question into the chat-like feature that we have. We'll do the best that we can to interact with you throughout today's webinar. In addition to that, we'll pause momentarily during the webinar to take some questions and at the end as well. We will run a polling question or two to keep you engaged, and also there's a post-webinar survey, which if you could take that, that would be great. So that's enough for our opening monologue. Let's jump into our agenda here for just one moment. And on today's agenda, we are going to be covering and highlighting some of the topics that we had in our promotion. So rules-based routing and really getting into helping to understand what the capabilities are within the system and the benefits back to radiology practices in organizations. We're going to talk a little bit about lowering the total cost of ownership of your IT infrastructure through IT virtualization. And then obviously everybody's on the go. You've got a smartphone, you've got a tablet, and being able to provide mobility solutions in a very fluid medical imaging type of environment is become very, very imperative. So we will highlight those three items. And along with that, we get an outstanding opportunity before we switch to talking about our featured speakers. We'll highlight our 3DI viewers, both our PACS ZFP, our zero footprint viewer, and our integrated advanced visualization. So with great pleasure right now, I'm going to introduce our featured speakers. First up, from Keystone Medical Technologies, we have Tommy Chambers, who is the principal of Keystone Medical Technologies, and he will handle the bulk of our presentation today. From Sheena Systems, we also have Sharon Levy-Stone, who is the project manager, and she's going to walk you through some high-level demos, which is really exciting, the fact that you're going to get to see some of the user interface and way that the application works through the workflow. But just keep in mind that we've got about 35 to 45 minutes on this webinar, so we're only able to go so deep on that. With that said, I'm now going to take a moment. I'm going to pass the webinar over to Tommy Chambers, and he's going to provide you with an overview of the 3DI PACS. Tommy?
Hi, Dennis. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. We appreciate you joining our webinar today. As Dennis said, I'm Tommy Chambers, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sharon Levy-Stone, who comes from our R&D facility. And we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to describe for you why we think our 3DI PACS architecture is helping in the ever-changing imaging marketplace to redefine how images are managed and distributed across the growing challenges in this imaging market. Having said that, these are the challenges that we're currently seeing from our customers and from the people that we talk to in the marketplace. With the advent of imaging chains and enterprise environments growing, and now the HIE, imaging traffic control has become a much larger challenge. So that's a challenge that we see, whether it's from an individual facility or across an enterprise or an HIE. And the other thing that we see with the growing landscape of the enterprise marketplace is IT's a lot more astute at making sure that their investment is not something that can become obsolete, in spite of the fact that technology is advancing at an ever-growing pace. And then, as Dennis alluded to earlier, the doctors are no longer fixtures in a location where they're shackled to a reading room. They're moving targets. Their workflow demands are greater. They have to do more with less, whether it's a reading radiologist or the referring physician or a specialty physician. And since we live in a world where everybody has mobility devices, our modernly architected platform allows us to be able to take advantage of that change in the workflow as we currently see it. And probably the most common thing that we're seeing too is that the referring physician has greater demands to get an accurate result but get it in a timely fashion, because ultimately he or she wants to communicate back to the patient. In today's world where you have physician and patient portals, that's very important. So these are the challenges, the main challenges that we're currently observing in the marketplace. And we would like to show you why we think we have a solution that's optimally can handle these challenges. As I said earlier, we have medical imaging users at both the hospital enterprise environment as well as the imaging centers, whether they're standalone or part of an imaging chain. And then, of course, the users, the radiologists, whether they're reading for their group's own studies or whether they're in a teleradiology environment where they're taking on overflow workflow or reading for various institutions. And then, of course, as I said a minute ago, the referring physician. So back to the agenda that we have for today's webinar. The ability to control traffic is handled by intelligent image routing, and we'll get into what we mean by intelligent image routing when we show you the application. Raising the point about the IT infrastructure and trying to control costs and improve efficiencies, we find that IT has a preference in many environments to virtualize the server applications so as not to have the mammoth data center with multiple boxes like traditionally we've seen in the past. And of course, once again, showing the mobility devices since the doctors are no longer ball and chain to the reading room. So regarding the rules-based routing, this pictorially will show you how we define that. Basically, the image originates at the modality. Once we receive that image from the modality, we take the DICOM information, populate it into the physician work list, and intelligently route that study to the assigned physician or the physician group. And after the physicians get done interpreting the study, we also have the ability to earmark the status of the study, whether it's a stat study or a routine study, so that the work list is addressed in a proper fashion depending on the urgency of the type of exam that was done. Now, at this point, I'd like to show you pictorially from the application how we do the rules-based routing. So if you'll give me a second, I just would like to switch over to the core application. So when a physician wants to address his or her work list, obviously for HIPAA compliance, there's a login required. And this login is specific to the user, not specific to a workstation. And as I log in and address my studies, there's a complete audit trail that goes on behind the scenes, again, to match the patient privacy and the HIPAA compliance for who touches what study and what's been done to it. So as you can see, this is my work list for the day. In this case, I have 7 cases up here, and we'll come back to this in a moment when we show you the individual cases. But at this top level, you have the ability to filter the studies that you want to look at for various work lists that can be already predefined as part of the workflow requirements. And there's also the ability to filter the study by logical parameters, be it patient information, study type, modality type, etc. But regarding the routing, we have the ability, as you can see from this screen, to assign where this image is going to go, whether it's going to go to a particular group or a user, what the status of the image is, and so on and so forth. This is at the application level. From an overall workflow management level, we also have the ability to let you control your entire enterprise with an integrated secondary application called our management console, which allows us to essentially control your traffic flow, as I alluded to earlier. And I think having said that, I would like to also invoke my colleague Shiran to get involved and show you what we mean by the management console and how this works. So at this point.
Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
As we can see currently, we are in the management console, which is the administrative software behind the scenes of the PACS server. So regarding the outer rules that we can set, we first can set rules to assign or unassign specific studies. We can see the studies that are currently available on the server and assign them to a specific user or a specific group of users. We can also perform stack anonymization of studies, and also we can send URL links for specific studies so then the study can be viewed by a referring physician or any other that is not even a user of the system, and it will be able to access the images using our web interface. There are also predefined rules that we can create and configure based on the site's workflow and requirements, such as pre-processing rules, study assignment rules. We can configure study statuses that will be available in the facility. We can set the icons, colors, and what status will be available, and so on. So as you can see, this administrative console allows us to customize and configure the PACS viewer depending on the site's needs.
Thank you, Sharon. At this point, we'd also like to offer the opportunity, if there have been any questions asked, to be able to address those. So I'll turn it back over to Dennis.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we are in transition from the demo over back to the presentation and taking a moment to do that, a couple of questions have come in through the chat. The first question is probably for Sharon here. What are the benefits of rules-based routing?
Benefits are that we can preset those automatic rules as we install the system. So once it was set and configured by the site's needs and requirements, there is no need to reset it again, no need for IT person to specifically set manually those rules that are frequently used. And we can set them by advanced mechanism that allows us to separate it into different groups, different type of users, etc.
Thank you, Sharon. And so, Tommy, as we transition back to the presentation as well again, I have another question from a participant by the name of Kenny, and very timely due to the fact that we've got IT virtualization coming up next. And he, and you may answer this in your presentation, but what's the latest and greatest in taking a 3D image and storing it into DICOM format?
Sharon?
Sorry, can you repeat, please, Dennis?
Sure. So one of our participants by the name of Kenny had a question about the latest and greatest in virtualization storage, and also taking a 3D image and storing it into DICOM format.
Well, storing images DICOM is one of the requirements of archiving medical images. What we do in order to decrease the needs for a very strong hardware is that we archive the images in compressed, and then images are more fastly loaded in streaming mode, and the volume of memory that is needed is decreased as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Sharon. So, Tommy, I'm going to pass things back over to you, back to the presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Dennis. So the second main focal point of our webinar is discussing the IT infrastructure. And essentially, I think this slide is probably familiar to many of you on the call. As I alluded to earlier, the days of having a mega data center are just not cost efficient from a standpoint of the outlay of capital dollars, as well as the cost to have IT staff to maintain it. So the whole goal with our virtualization capabilities is that you can get away from this type of data center and move into a much smaller footprint and much cleaner support mechanism for your IT people. And then the last point that we want to address today in our webinar is the mobility solutions. So back to the workflow diagram, the study will originate, in this case it's a cardiac CT, and after the physician, the radiologist, interprets it, it gets sent to the referring physician with an incorporated URL. So this URL allows the referring physician or the receiver to be able to not only see the result, but be able to see the same series. And when I say series, I mean not just static images, but full dynamic images. Our solution spans cardiology, radiology, and other subspecialties of medicine. So that physician has the ability, in the case of a cardiac exam, to be able to review dynamically an angiogram at its native frame rate, or to be able to see motion related to the study so that he or she can have a better understanding as to what the radiologist was interpreting. And that referring physician, again, is usually a moving target, sometimes at one location one day, another location another day, etc. And with the popularity of iPads, iPhones, basically smart mobile devices, we have the ability to let the physician stay on the go, be more efficient in his or her workflow, and still have the ability to review quality diagnostic images, as well as our zero footprint application allows the physician to be able to harness these images without having to go through the traditional means of having a dedicated workstation with the whole burden of having downloaded or pre-downloaded an ActiveX. The zero footprint viewer is basically does not have those requirements, so it's able to be incorporated on any type of mobile device. In general, you all had a quick glimpse of the 3DI platform, which we will come back to momentarily. But our platform is modernly architected. We've actually been at this for 20 years, and this is pretty much our main focus. So we're not a Walmart shop where we have resources allocated to building modality machines or building light bulbs or whatever. The advantage that we bring with that keen focus is that we're very responsive to the ever-changing marketplace. So nowadays there's a movement toward people wanting to look at the cloud, especially when the resources of IT are not prevalent on site, depending on the size and scope of the facility. So we offer the traditional ability to have the application hosted in your environment, but we also offer the ability to do the hosting for you. And whether we host it or you host it, we have the advanced visualization is de facto in the product. Traditionally, the advanced visualization required what they call third-party plugins, and those have been provided by specialty players, of which, honestly, that's how we started in the marketplace. We've been an advanced visualization provider for 20 years and OEMing it to some of the major manufacturers. But with the ever-changing marketplace and our nimbleness to respond to that, we now have the advanced visualization as part of our main solution platform, and that lives whether it's in the cloud or a self-hosted PACS. And when we talk about the cloud, this gives you a little bit of an idea of the benefits that we see our customers communicating back to us about offering the solution in the cloud and still maintaining the integrity and the robustness to be able to have the cloud be able to handle load balancing, and as Kenny's question alluded to, the ability to still take complicated images and provide them to the user, whether it's local or on our zero footprint viewer. And as you can see, there's some other attributes or requirements that we find our customers demanding from the cloud infrastructure. Now, our viewer has, the diagnostic PACS viewer has incorporated advanced hanging protocols. And these hanging protocols are user-based, so again, they're not tied to a workstation. So wherever that user accesses the images, whether it's at a computer or at a mobile device, they have the ability to have those hanging protocols follow them. And in this example, we're showing mammography because in mammography studies, relevant priors are very prevalent. And the advanced hanging protocol that you see here allows the current study to be automatically compared to the relevant prior, and that's defined by the hanging protocol and the rules that Shiran described earlier. And we'll show you dynamically how that operates when we go back to the actual application or the demo. The zero footprint viewer, as we alluded to, is not a light beer viewer. It has the ability to do the same processing that you have at the PACS viewer, meaning, as you can see here, the volume rendering or 3D images on the left. On the right, we have the slab view where you can navigate through the different projections of the series and have incorporated reference lines and be able to basically peruse the study without having to be at a particular workstation. And at the bottom, just repeating that the ability to have these be on the devices and follow the workflow of the user's demands on the go. And then finally, I mentioned earlier about our advanced visualization. So this is how we started, and we've watched this market grow from this being a luxury item to being a standard item. And in fact, it's probably fortunate for us, the fact that we've been doing this part for 20 years, as we've watched over the last few years at RSNA, the demands of the user are that advanced visualization be incorporated without requiring plugins, because plugins are costly. They're also specific to a particular workstation. And since this is where we started, it was a lot easier for us to adapt to the changes in the marketplace, because we came down here where other companies out there are still trying to have this be incorporated. And typically that gets done vis-a-vis acquisitions and mergers, and that level of integration is inferior to what we have in our standard DNA set. So this particular example shows our PET-CT fusion application. Again, we'll go to this when we get into the application momentarily. We find that a lot of oncologists really enjoy the benefit of, in case the interpreting radiologist did not pick the right level of fusion between the two native series of the CT and the PET, that they're not relegated to asking the interpreting radiologist to go back and reprocess the information. When we send that study to the oncologist, he or she has the ability to alter the level of fusion in case they want to peruse the study at a more granular level. And in addition to the PET-CT, for the oncology market, we have always been very strong in cardiology. So for cardiology, we offer vessel segmentation, calcium scoring, and then another part of our advanced visualization provides the capability to do virtual colonoscopy, which we find very prevalent, of course, in the GI market segment. So that's kind of an overview of the three levels of viewing applications that we incorporate into our product. And of course, with all those imaging capabilities, it would be foolhardy if we could not include those in the final report. So I mentioned earlier how important the referring physician is. When we send that referring physician the final report, we include the images that, as well as the annotations that were earmarked by the interpreting physician. But again, they're not just static images. In this example, I'm showing a report template with 2 highlighted images, but we also included an embedded URL link. So if the receiver of that image says, hey, I want to see the whole movie, not just the cliff notes, they have that URL link that lets them see the entire series, and yet it's still HIPAA compliant to make sure that they're not reaching into your work list and being able to look at other patients. And that's generally a summary of our platform. I think to corroborate these still slides in the presentation, at this point I'd like to dive back into the application so that you can see dynamically what I just described. Okay, so I had shown this work list earlier when I talked about the rules routing, but now I'd like to get into the meat of the application. Essentially, I've logged in as under my user credentials, and this is showing me my current work list for the day. This information can be displayed as a patient list or as a studies list. You can see here on the left, I have my patient list with my individuals with whom I'm obligated to read for the day, and then I have the studies information to the right of that, with a more granular look at the individual series that are available. And at the bottom, I have if there are any attachments included, whether they're reports or other images that maybe came from a different source. It gives me kind of an overview of what I'm looking at from a helicopter view of my work list. And at this point, I'd like to dive into a couple studies. And Shiran, would you like to take over?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
We'll go to our first study that we are going to demonstrate. It will be a child case. I will first load it to our PACS viewer, which is diagnostic viewer. As you can see, it works in streaming mode. Images are loaded, and once all images are available for reading, we will get a final status of the images. I'll double click to enlarge the image. So we can see now the original images in 2D view. We have basic manipulation tools available. We also have MagGlass option that allows us to zoom in specific region of interest and drag this magnifying zone across the 2D image. We have the ability to control the layouts and the ability to navigate to the next studies on the list in web patient browser. Also available annotation tools such as val cursor, straight line measurement, etc. We have basic image tools such as different filters and ability to create scene of the images and integrated voice recording option. Second stage in PACS viewer is the slab view, MPR view, which allows us to see the images in axial, sagittal, and coronal views. All views are synchronized, and once I will change the main image, the two other images will change accordingly to display the other two orientations. I can flip the image, flip back. Another nice option is the ability to increase slice thickness, to perform rotation of the axis, and also to define the center of axis just by dragging it to a point of interest on the image. We also have available 3D option, 3D stage. Currently we can see the image in VR. We have predefined protocols for every modality that can be displayed as volumetric. So for CT, we also have cardiac protocol, muscle, skin protocol, and more. More protocols can be created, and they can be created by user preferences. We also have available MIP option and other rendering modes. A nice tool that is available is the cube option that allows us to set a specific volume of interest just by playing with these control points. I can disable it. And we can also have the ability to cut the planes, and we can also use sculpt tool. These are the basic options available in PACS viewer. So going back to web patient browser, I can also upload a study to our web-based viewer, zero footprint viewer, which runs directly on your browser. It can be supported using any web browser and any web-enabled device such as iPad, iPhones, and Android devices. There is no need to install or download this web viewer, and this is why it is very applicable for referring physicians. We currently can see a report that was generated using our report module. We can see patient information, images, and also we can see the images just by clicking on image thumbnail. So we also have here basic operations, 2D options, same slab option, same slab view, with ability to increase or decrease slice thickness, as we can see right now, and also orientation tools available, and more. And here we have our 3D stage. Note that everything is done on the browser, on home network, and it is displayed very fastly, so we can see the image in 3D and also the 3 slab views, MPR views on the side. Again, we can switch to MIP view, VR, and we also have supported VR protocols.
And, excuse me for interrupting, but I want to reiterate the point that the physicians have demanded to have the viewer be a portable viewer, but the result that we've noticed in the marketplace over the last 10 years is that generally that relegates the physician to being in a light beer mode, meaning they either don't see a diagnostic quality image, or they don't have the ability to manipulate the image, as Shiran just showed you. So we're very proud of the architecture that we have that allows our zero footprint or web viewer to be congruent to the PACS viewer, which is what you just saw in the application. Now, forgive me for interrupting, Shiran.
Thank you. So next, I would like to upload this mammography study that includes one new study and one prior study. This patient will emphasize our advanced hanging protocols. This is one of the protocols that we created for mammography, including the prior views. As we can see, prior are tagged as prior, so we will be able to distinguish easily between the current study and the prior one. We can go through the protocols that are available for this specific patient, for this specific mammography case, just by clicking on keyboard left and right arrows. Any protocol you can think of can be created. Protocols can be available for a specific user or for a specific group of users, and we will set trigger depending on your requirements of when and what kind of protocol to upload. A nice feature that we have is the ability to set in the protocol settings link by Zoom and reverse panning, etc. So this one emphasizes the advanced hanging protocols. I will go to the last study that we would like to demonstrate, and for this one I will use our PACS application. You can see that the advanced clinical applications are available again from the web patient browser. All of our applications can be integrated easily to the PACS. So one of them is the PACS. On PACS layout, we can see a volumetric image of the PET images, and also we can see separately the CT images, the PET images, and a fused view of both of them. A nice feature is that we have, you can see that our platform has same buttons and same functionality, which allows to learn it and control it very fastly, because we have a lot of common tools between the different applications, the basic ones. The advanced option here in PACS application is the ability to reset the auto-registration of the fused view. So I can click on Add Pair, select the pair of points that would define my registration, and you can see that images moved accordingly and fused image changed a little bit. I can add more points if I would like, and they will be a rigid-like points that will define my fused view, the path over the CT image. This is basically it, by going quickly over the application.
Thank you, Sharon. At this point, I'd like to just kind of go back to our presentation momentarily and collectively summarize what we've discussed thus far. And then I think I'd like to have Dennis handle more questions, as we promised to do that, both live and after the webinar is completed. So we last left off talking about the prowess of the viewer, as well as taking the prowess of that viewer manipulation and including it in the final result back to the referring physician. And essentially what this results in is that with the architecture that we have in place here, and this is our 3rd generation platform over our 20 years of experience, because again, this is all we do, so we have to do it better than other people or other products or solutions out there. The result of all this culminates to the fact that we've truly made the reading room be virtual. And that's something that has been the holy grail, but many other solutions till now have kind of gotten you partway there. So to summarize what we've discussed so far, with our routing, we improve workflow efficiency and still cope with the broader demands of distribution from the referring doctor back to the specialist and back to the original interpreting physician. And this efficiency we found has helped people be able to grow their operation and improve it with the increase in volume of studies, improve their workflow, and still take on this additional volume, which is the nature of a successful facilities imaging operations. The IT efficiencies that we provide are twofold: through the virtualization, which we've discussed a couple of times, and the zero footprint viewer. The virtualization, as I mentioned earlier, allows you to have a more efficient cost structure in your data center. And the zero footprint viewer is not only nice for the referring physician. Usually the imaging center, if the viewer that goes to the referring physician is dependent on an ActiveX download, then the host facility has to help the referring physician be able to accomplish that. And generally, host facilities want to have as many referring physicians as they have, but they don't have the resources to do the hand-holding required. And in all fairness, some of the referring physicians, depending on their IT expertise, are not capable to do that self-reliantly. The zero footprint viewer takes that burden off of IT and still provides that easily for the referring physician without having to be an IT expert. So essentially, the efficiency there we've translated into saving dollars from an IT infrastructure and cost structure. And then finally, the mobility, which we've alluded to more than once, allowing access for both the radiologists and referring physicians without requiring them to be in any dedicated physical location. And that's basically a summary of the 3 main points that we wanted to discuss in our agenda today. At this point, I'd like to see if any of you all have questions. And Dennis, I don't know what you've been seeing from the audience, but I'd like to turn it back over to you in case there are any additional questions that we can provide answers to.
Absolutely, Tommy. Thank you so much. I appreciate you passing this back over. We've got a number of questions that have come in. It's not too late to go ahead and register your question. And if you could advance the slide, I would like to just to make some references there. But as I prepare a couple of the questions that have come in, I'm going to launch our first polling question of our webinar today. And so if you're attending RSNA, and as you can see on the screen, we are going to be there as well, and we'd love to make sure that we connect with you. So be sure, if you are attending RSNA, it's obviously the great shopping time of the year to get out and see what is new in the marketplace. And then obviously we would love the opportunity to be able to sit down, meet with you, and take you into more of a deep dive on our PACS systems. So with that said, Tommy, first question that's come in has to deal around advanced visualization. And the question is, how are you able to incorporate advanced visualization into your standard PACS platform?
Well, fundamentally, as I said earlier, that's where we started. So unlike, basically with us watching the evolution of the marketplace, now that advanced visualization is not tolerated as a luxury item, A, for the cost, and B, for the fact that it's typically put on one workstation, and the users of imaging access are not, they're moving targets. So since we started there, we're able to go downhill to backfill our prowess in advanced visualization to complete our solution from our original inception as an advanced visualization plugin, which we were as well 20 years ago, to a full-blown PACS. Again, what I mentioned earlier is what we've seen other companies do is they typically traditionally had relationships with some of the advanced visualization providers like Terra Recon, Vital, Voxar, and I see some of the larger, for lack of a better slang, Walmart shops achieving this by starting with buying that company. An acquisition does not turn into overnight integration. That typically takes a few more years of evolution. So the fact that this is where we started is what lends itself for our solution to be on the cutting edge of having it truly integrated, where I think it's going to take a little bit longer for some of the legacy solution providers to achieve that level of seamless integration, because it's true. I mean, it's how we started. We're not cobbling anything together.
Great, Tommy. So that concluded our first polling question as well. And again, we are going to be at RSNA, booth 6028. A number of you are attending RSNA, so be sure to make sure that you connect with us when you are at the show. So another question for you as we launch our second polling question, Tom, is going to be, what feedback have you received from your customers regarding the zero footprint viewer?
The number one feedback is the quality of the viewer. The fact that, as Sharon showed in her interaction with the application, the congruency, when we looked at that case of that child case, which everybody could see, the case is because the child has a significant tumor. And of course, the expectation would be to be able to see that when you're sitting at the diagnostic PACS workstation, but to be able to see that with the same level of detail and manipulation capabilities at the zero footprint viewer truly corroborates the premise that we have. Our zero footprint viewer essentially results in the reading room becoming truly virtual. The other thing that feedback we received is the fact that I mentioned this earlier, that it's zero footprint allows the non-IT expert person to be able to self-reliantly download that. And again, this person probably has more than one place where he or she reviews images. So it's one thing to say, well, okay, I successfully downloaded it to my office workstation, but now this person has an iPad, an iPhone, an Android, whatever. They can download it to as many devices that they want, and this is an unlimited licensing thing. So that's the third point, is we do not charge in like groups of licenses. The application is unlimited to users both at the PACS level and the zero footprint level. And so we find that there's a lot of appeal for our solution because of that, from its integrity standpoint and from a cost investment standpoint.
So Tommy, we've got a number of questions on integration, and while we'd love to address just one of them, we've kind of have a broad stroke across how well 3DI PACS is able to play with other medical systems and other IT systems in the marketplace today. And there was EMR representation, EHR representation. If you name a vendor, it probably was listed in a multiple of ways and questions. So that's the first part of a two-parter on integration. How well does 3DI PACS play with other IT vendors and medical systems vendors?
So Sharon showed the behind-the-scenes application called the Management Console, and we did not touch on every dimension of that. But integrated at that level is an innate, very robust HL7 engine. So the HL7 brokering of ORM and ORU messages, again, is native to the DNA of the application. When I showed the report with the images in it, the assumption is that report's going back to the referring physician. And most of them, if not by choice, by being coerced, have EMRs. And the HL7 protocol for ORM and ORU message communication is a requirement both from our side, being an imaging solution provider, as well as the EHR side. To this day, we have not run into an EHR platform that we weren't able to achieve that integration. That's at the EHR level. The other thing is we have the ability to have our PACS be, there's another trend in the marketplace at the enterprise imaging platform level for VNA. And when I say VNA, I'm not talking about VNA traditionally, which was more at a fundamental level, just vendor neutral archiving. Nowadays, the true VNA solutions out there have at the heart of them an intelligent, I liken it to an air traffic control tower where it can ingest information from a variety of systems, normalize data, and then propagate it or push it downstream to EHRs, to individual department level applications that are already incumbent and where the user has a comfort level. And our application has the ability, in our solution set, we provide that intelligent VNA architecture with our other dimension called Keystone Suite, but we also play nicely with the other enterprise engine VNA solutions out there, for example, Accuo, TerraMedica, Data First, etc.
So, Tommy, that kind of then brings us into the second part of the question on integration, and that is bidirectional image sharing between disparate PACS systems or PACS systems by competitive entities. So, are you able to take images from a non-3D IPACS and populate them into the 3D IPACS and vice versa? Take an image from a 3D IPACS and populate it into a non-named other vendor across the board.
Right. No, it's a good question, and the answer is absolutely yes. So on the case of us receiving images and populating the 3DI viewer that we showed, that capability is fundamentally requires that the image be in a DICOM format. And I think everybody on this call knows that DICOM is a church and not necessarily always the same pew. So having said that, this is where our ability to do normalization of the data comes into play, where we can take that DICOM information, decipher it, and our viewer can process it and apply the attributes of our viewing prowess to that DICOM native data set. When it comes to pushing the data back out, that's an easier path for us because of the amount of DICOM tags and header and DIR file information that we have incorporated in our application. If anything, sometimes we reduce the amount of data we're pushing out depending on what the receiving end would like to see. And the other thing that comes into play here when you talk about this type of integration is a lot of legacy PACS systems out there. We have found that eventually, after our prowess is proven at one facility, there's an appetite to standardize across an enterprise. We have some projects ongoing right now. We just completed one at University of Virginia, and we have a few others out there, one at University of Washington, et cetera. And in this application of our integration, we're required to take the legacy data from these older systems and have it be put into the workflow analogous to what Shiran showed with the Henry protocols pulling up relevant prior. And that's not that difficult from being able to read the DICOM data set. But what is difficult about it is the patient ID schema that comes from that legacy system is all over the map. So when we do our importation of legacy systems or legacy data migration, we have sophistication in our management console to be able to take that data, write scripts whereby when we import it, we won't alter the image, but we'll be able to incorporate our prospective patient ID schema so that the advantage of pulling up relevant priors is invoked.
All right, thanks, Tommy. I appreciate that, addressing that answer for our members here, part of our webinar. So the questions coming in now, I think that we're coming to the part of the close of our webinar. And before we do that, one more question before we give you the opportunity to have some closing remarks. What is the overall value of your 3DI solution?
Well, I mean, the truth is the overall value we've shown in this webinar as far as the prowess of the application and how robust it is given its modern architecture from an IT perspective. I say the icing on the cake to that is that, again, we're a niche player and we're not a company or an organization with a lot of overhead. Our strength is predominantly very strong R&D. So the kind of the knockout punch or the punchline for us is people look at this application and then they say, okay, hit me with the cost. It's a very scalable solution. It's very price competitive, and sometimes it's so price competitive that people kind of ask you where the rub is. And the rub is that we're a flat organization and we don't have a ton of overhead to overinflate what the ownership cost is of our product, and we also offer it not only in the traditional capital model, but in a fee per study model or a volume-based model. So it's a very price competitive solution. I'm always reticent to talk about price until people see the application first, because if I predispose you to the price, you'll expect this to be a Chevette or a Pinto, and in fact, where we see ourselves in the market, not to sound corny, is we're a Lexus at an Impala price.
That's a great analogy, Tom. So with that being said, we've come to the top of the hour. We want to be mindful of everybody's time. And again, thanks everyone for participating in today's webinar. Tom, we're going to give you the mic for closing remarks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably have talked enough where people are sick of my voice, but I think the closing remark I have is that we believe the prowess of this application and the streamlining of workflow that it provides basically allows the radiologist to be able to increase their workload without increasing their stress factor or the burden on them. So it's an easier workload for the physician without capping their capacity for volume. And in the end, the real final important aspect is, given what you've seen in the application with all the capabilities, it might sound idealistic, but to fundamentally help improve patient care, both from the quality of patient care and the response back to patients in a very timely and expedient fashion. I mean, there's other things that we didn't discuss in the webinar, but again, to be respectful of everyone's time, I think that kind of summarizes why we asked to have this webinar today, to show what we mean when we say redefine image management and distribution.
Thank you, Tommy. And this concludes our webinar for today. And again, if you've got any questions, you can follow up with us at 201-323-0089 or Tom Chambers at KeystoneMedicalUS.com, or visit us at our RSNA booth, which is 6028. And this concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much for attending.